planes, when they came down, and me and another fellow watched 2 or 3 of them drop their torpedoes. And I ran to my battle station at that time and said, "This is not a drill, or under attack from the Japanese force."
The bombing of Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, catapulted America into World War II. Nearly 4 years and 300,000 lives later, the United States was victorious. Jay Mackenzie is a Pearl Harbor survivor from Provo.
Me and another fellow watched 2 or 3 of them drop their torpedoes. And I'm sure it was the Oklahoma. No, I more believe it might have been the West Virginia that the torpedoes went into and blew up. And about that time, we were talking, you know, and I thought, gee, them guys are kind of an odd drill. Is, you know, Sunday, we usually hadn't had any drills on Sunday, and then they were dropping what looked like real torpedoes, but we didn't think there were going to be any explosion, and these gigantic explosions came out. So then about that time, the general quarters sounded, and I ran to my battle station at that time. They said, "This is not a drill, or under attack from the Japanese force."
Jay's ship, the USS St. Louis, was the only major ship to leave the harbor during the attack.
When the second wave came in, we were just got under ready. We had everything ready, and the ship captain, we cut the lines loose and backed out, and came around, and we came up past all the battleships around the end of Fort Island and went on out to sea. And on the way out, we were the first major ship to leave the harbor while the attack was still going on. And on the way out, the Japanese had a small submarine sitting there to try to sink some major ship in the harbor itself. I'm not even sure if any little ships had went out. I'm not aware that any had. But they fired a spread of 3 torpedoes at us, and they were evidently thought we were a lot bigger than we were, because they was too deep, and they went right underneath us and exploded in the bank behind us.
Joel Steele witnessed the sneak attack on Pearl Harbor from his Army barracks only a few miles away.
I woke up real early the next morning on December the 7th, and so I decided to go down to the mess hall, and the mess sergeant and I were pretty good buddies, and we was sitting there having coffee and talking about my trip back home and my reassignment probably in the States. You know, I wasn't ready for discharge yet. So, and then pretty soon we heard all these booms going off and airplanes flying around, and we knew that none of our airplanes would ever go up. It was something, you know, didn't happen on Sunday.
In Utah, the attack at Pearl Harbor greatly accelerated the government's largest wartime construction project, the building of the Geneva steel plant. Joel's brother Tom was among thousands of others who worked feverishly on the Geneva steel plant while his brother was at war.
It was a big part of the war effort, because all our steel went to...
Rick Fish is a Utah historian.
Plans for the plant were already underway prior to the bombing of Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. President Roosevelt had approved the site selection, and the plans were in place. Some of the property had yet to be purchased, and other than that, the plant was proceeding as fast as it could be. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the building of the plant intensified greatly.
Mel Thurman worked on construction of Geneva steel before being drafted into the Navy.
It was interesting to watch these buildings grow. We knew that we had to get it done, that they was short on steel for the war effort.
By November 1942, the war in the Pacific was nearing its height. Jay Mackenzie's ship, the USS St. Louis, was engaged in the Battle of Guadalcanal. Joel Steele was training troops who would end up fighting the Battle of the Bulge, while his brother Tom was engaged in the construction of Geneva steel. A series of fires at Geneva steel during the Battle of Guadalcanal caused a delay in construction.
The government wanted to build the plant in approximately a year, and everything was moving towards that completion date. Everything was very intensive, crews working around the clock. Unfortunately, several fires occurred which destroyed critical equipment needed to finish the facility and pushed the construction back several months.
On February 2nd, 1943, the German Sixth Army surrendered at Stalingrad, a turning point in the war with the Soviet Union. Less than a week later, Ott Heber, a worker assisting in the construction of Geneva steel, scribbled on a wall, "I hope the war will be over soon."
Geneva was built to send steel plate to the shipyards in California. In March of 1944, the first plate was rolled.
Some of the steel made at Geneva was used to construct Liberty ships. These ships were designed to be built quickly and to last only about 5 years. Their purpose was to take much-needed supplies, everything from food and clothes to ammunition, to Europe and the Pacific. Combined with steel made at plants throughout America, Geneva's steel was used to construct more than 2,700 Liberty ships in less than 5 years.
There are several famous ships that everyone would know in World War II, like the USS Arizona and others like the Yorktown and the Lexington, which have great notoriety. Most people probably wouldn't, however, know about such ships as the SS Provo or the Brigham Young, the Joseph Smith. Geneva's national prominence drew so much attention to Geneva that when the Liberty Ship project was underway in California, the government used several Mormon place names, LDS place names, and Utah place names and to name these ships. So these ships actually did go out and were in the war.
War bonds were being sold throughout the United States to help finance the war. At Geneva, a push was on to get construction workers to buy the bonds.
I say every month we sign up for war bonds to help the war effort. We bought them all the time we were working there.
On June 14th, 1944, 8 days after the Normandy invasion, Geneva Steel was ordered by the War Production Board to produce shell steel billets. These billets were rectangular pieces of steel cut to shell casing size. They were shipped to an Army ordnance plant in Denver for finishing.
The plant was originally intended to ship steel plate to California. However, many other items were sent. They were in desperate need for, such as light oils, solvents, and iron. At one period of time in the history of this plant, they were sending nearly all the iron manufactured in the west part of the United States to the shipyards in California and Washington.
In January 1945, the first shell billets were shipped from the Geneva plant. A month later, Jay's ship, the USS St. Louis, was in the Battle of Iwo Jima.
As far as the St. Louis is concerned, she was mostly a bombardment ship. She bombarded Iwo Jima for, something like 50, I don't have to get it straight. I think it's 24 straight days. It just bombarded her.
Although there was a shortage of workers at the newly completed Geneva steel plant, officials at the plant received some interesting letters.
Because of the national prominence of the steel plant, many newspapers and magazines were carrying the information that there was a manpower shortage at Geneva. Consequently, people from all over started to sending in applications. Probably one of the most unique applications came from 3 willing applicants wanting to come to work for Geneva. There was only one small problem. In their letter on February 25th, 1945, they said, "We'll come and help if you will just come and rescue us from our POW camp here in Germany."
6 months later, the war was over. Japan had surrendered unconditionally, marking the end of World War II. America and the Allied powers had been victorious, due in large part to the American steel industry.
I'd like to make a statement to anybody in the future. Don't ever let America be unprepared again.
War clouds hovered over the nation. Steel was needed. Tons, score on score. Uncle Sam says we can make it from Utah coal and Utah ore. Came then to Provo by the thousands, men with brains and men with brawn, labored there to build a steel plant. Dawn to darkness, dark to dawn.